Welcome to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld, and I'm joined by not one, but two Rosenfeld authors. And, you know, to write a book, you have to be pretty thoughtful. Yet these two guys kind of take the thoughtfulness to really like the nth degree. They're two the most thoughtful people that I know, just great thinkers and great writers too. I mean, it's so much fun to work with them. I guess I better go ahead and let you know who they are. Harry Max and Jorge Arango. Hey guys, welcome to the Rosenfeld Review.
Great to be here, Lou. Thank you so much. Nice to see you, Jorge.
Nice to see you both. I was thinking you two are among my oldest friends in the IA/UX community. So it's a treat to be here. And I thought, Lou, that you were going to say thoughtfulness to a fault, which might be apt.
No, that's me. I'll take that crown. But if you don't know Harry and Jorge, well, Jorge, I've had the pleasure of being a co-author with, along with Peter Marvel, on the, good Lord, 4th edition of Information Architecture for the Web and Beyond, also known as the Polar Bear book. Jorge, I think that book is like 12 years old now, somehow?
This year is the 10th anniversary of that edition coming up.
10th, okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of anniversaries, it's also the first anniversary of the last book you wrote, duly noted. And you've also written another Rosenfeld book, Living in Information.
That's right.
Harry, your book, Managing Priorities, is pretty recent too, just last May. And it's the only book all about prioritization out there, which I still find pretty exciting. So we've got a lot of interesting perspectives from you two represented as authors, from prioritization to note-taking for this new digital AI-infused age. Obviously, Jorge, living in information is a very relevant topic because the concept of place is becoming, information as place is becoming not only more important, but almost expected. And yet we're not really talking about your books per se. You guys told me that we were going to do something different. There's something new that you guys have going on. And it's a new year. I know it's a good time to start new things. What are we talking about here? Is it like some sort of joint resolutions, or are you going to write a book together? What's going on? Let me in on this.
Well, let me start just briefly by saying a couple of months ago, I got an email from Jorge, and it started, the first line said, "I've got a crazy idea."
Crazy idea.
I thought, you had me at hello. So Jorge hopped on a plane and flew up to San Francisco. We met in Oakland for dinner and had a wonderful conversation about a new project that he was proposing, something that we've begun working on and will be launching soon. Maybe Jorge, you can just speak to how it's evolving.
Well, I'll say this, by the time that folks listen to this, it will have likely launched. What we have been working on, the crazy idea, was a podcast, which I guess doesn't sound that crazy, right? People do podcasts, but I guess what is crazy is the format and perhaps the focus of the show, particularly given our backgrounds.
Okay, you know, podcasts, good. I've certainly enjoyed The Informed Life, which I think you just wrapped up, Jorge.
That's right. So The Informed Life was a podcast that I produced for 5 years. And it actually started as a result of a conversation with you, Lou. When I had just come off writing Living in Information, you came up to San Francisco, and we had dinner with a group of people, and you asked me, well, now that the book is done, what are you on to next? And I said, well, I have this idea that I would like to explore about information architecture for your own information, for your own stuff. But I don't want it to be about my methods. I want to see how other people are doing it. And I think I want to do a podcast as a means to do research for this thing. And that's what that podcast essentially started as. It started as a way for me to talk with people about how they organize information to get things done. It evolved from that. And by the end, it was more general kind of information architecture, UX stuff. But basically, at the end of 2024, the podcast had served its mission. You know, the book came
Hmm.
out at the beginning of the year. And also, the information architecture, user experience design field is clearly changing a lot. And it's time to move on to other things. And I need to make space in my life for other things to focus on. So I shelved that basically.
Well, I'm sorry to see it go. And I totally get it that a podcast is often for the podcaster to use as an excuse to learn, to talk to interesting people like we're doing right now. So, in that spirit, teach us what's the new thing you're going to work on? A podcast, but not just a podcast.
So the let's see how much we want to reveal here, but most of the podcasts that I listen to anyway are typically some well-informed person leading interviews with really interesting personalities, experts, and other personalities. And when Jorge and I got together and started talking about what we wanted to do, one of the things that we talked about was the magic that seems to come alive in some of the conversations that happen behind the scenes. And
Mm-hmm.
I know from many years of getting feedback from folks that I tend to be much better as an extemporaneous speaker and conversationalist than somebody who follows kind of the formalism of writing and structured presentation. And we started riffing on that and came up with a concept that I mean, it was wonderful looking at Jorge's face when we started talking about it because he just lit up and he's like, "That's a great idea." And it reminded me of being in a band. You see a guitar on my wall behind me, and when you're playing something and somebody goes, "I like that," and so it really felt like being an artist and a musician, and that matters a lot to me because, I'm trying to live in that space of being very much alive as an artist. And yet I'm a professional and I'm trying to, push that forward as well. What would you add, Jorge?
Well, I'll add to that I mentioned that the format is a little bit different than my previous podcast. Uh, the Informed Life was an interview show where every episode featured a different guest. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, if I like podcasting, I like having these conversations. I get a lot of value out of podcasts myself, so I believe in the medium. And as I was thinking, what kind of podcast would I like to do if I could start a different one? I kept coming back to the idea of not an interview-based show, but a show that is kind of a running conversation between two co-hosts. And I remember mentioning to Harry the podcast Two Bobs
Hmm.
with David C. Baker and Blair Enns. And there are others. A very early podcast called Manager Tools comes to mind. And it was always the same two co hosts tackling different topics that are relevant to their chosen audience.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the case of Manager Tools, as it's implied by the name, it's managers, particularly people who are new to management, I would say is the or was the focus of that show. I haven't listened in years. And in the case of Two Bobs, it's creative agency owners is the way that I would
Mm-hmm.
describe it, right? So these folks are discussing topics that add value for these people, and that's kind of what I wanted to have this new show be, rather than an interview with a different person every week. I wanted to have a deeper conversation in my case, and we'll see how it evolves over time, but in my case, the conversation would be about what people who are in leadership positions, how they can make more skillful decisions based on the knowledge that in my case, the knowledge that I've accrued from information architecture and user experience design. But I didn't want it to just be my knowledge. And when I thought about like, well, who else could I think of who would be a good co-host for such a conversation? The first person that came to mind was Harry.
Mm-hmm.
And I had Harry as a guest on the Informed Life when his book came out, and I was like, man, this is perfect. Like this, Harry is like the perfect person like. It's like my dream co-host for this thing. So I was very excited when he agreed to go to dinner with me and sign up for this.
It seems kind of ridiculous because, as I shared with Jorge at our dinner, I think I've had a small number of people on my list of folks I want to work with. And Jorge was damn near on the top of that list. And I've told him this over years. And so to have him reach out and say, crazy idea, I was just so happy about it.
I love this. And I love that if I'm understanding, you're shooting to expose a lot of the kind of work folks like us have been doing in IA forever to a more senior audience that for whom it might still be a term they haven't heard. In fact, I wonder, will you even be using that term, information architecture?
I'm not sure that I'm trying to think back. It might have come up in at least one of the conversations, but the main point is the principles and practices behind information architecture are applicable to a lot of domains. I think that most people who have even heard of the term think about it almost exclusively in the context of user experience design. But how you categorize things has a tremendous impact on how you understand the world, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you think about that as kind of like the baseline, then the implications for strategic decision making are clear. But I don't expect the conversations to be exclusively about information architecture. In fact, even though Harry and I met at an information architecture retreat many years ago, I don't think that, Harry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that you are an information architecture practitioner, right?
Not anymore. I mean, I was very early in my career. I mean, I started in online technical documentation, evolved into information architecture. Before that was even a title, really, perhaps anywhere but IBM. And my career has often really been in front of the titles that exist for any number of years at a number of different companies. My title was special staff because they didn't know what to call me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to call me. But interestingly, back to this place that the three of us met, in Asilomar so many years ago, I think it was. It was fascinating because the central topic in that conversation was, as designers and information architects, how do we get a seat at the table? And I remember sitting there for hours, just eventually starting to seethe with frustration at the nature of the conversation because we were all talking designer language and
Mm-hmm.
information architecture language. And finally, it was my time to talk. And I got up and I took the pen and I said, this is crazy talk. Like no one's going to take us seriously unless we start speaking the language of business, right? How do people make money? How do people save money? How do they avoid unnecessary costs? How do they set and achieve goals? How do they set priorities, right? How do they build a brand? How do they build market share and all this stuff? So it's very much about the language, but it's not our language. It's the language of the people that we want to be communicating with. So I think we'll probably be talking about information architecture a lot. I suspect we'll never mention that term, not because that term's not valuable, but because that term's not relevant to many of the people we're
Right.
speaking to and want to communicate with and connect with. But we will be talking about how to structure thinking, how to structure decisions, how to create, an outcome-oriented environment to get stuff done that's important. This is all information architecture, but it's the secret sauce behind the scenes.
Oh, wow. How do you like that for a response? Uh, I mean, it is, really, I mean, like, if you can get that conversation to happen in a way that brings it home to the audience that you're shooting for, you're going to really have done something of service, not just to that audience, but to those of us who've been trying all these years to get these principles in front of, really these tools in front of that audience. So I'm gonna let that sit with me for a moment while we take a break, because I'm still like, wow, that means a lot of things. I don't even know what all the things are yet. So give me a break and give our guests a break. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. We're going to keep talking with Harry and Jorge in just a moment. I'm going to give you 5 reasons you should be using the Rosenverse. First one, where else are you going to find 100 events that you can attend for free every year, 2 a week, about product management, product design, and UX design, plus a highly engaged Slack-based community of over 13,000 of your peers. What else are you going to find in the Rosenverse? You'll find hundreds and hundreds of recordings of conference presentations and community session recordings, all in one place from a single search browser interface. And behind those hundreds of recordings are hundreds of experts, people who have advanced the field, people who are your peers who are doing interesting new things, all in one place. Why else should you use the Rosenverse? We've been advancing the field of UX since 2005. You're going to find the most advanced content on such topics as design operations and program management, UX research, and a host of other topics, from climate UX to civic design to how designers can work better in product organizations. Lastly, you've been trusting our content since we started back in 2005. Whether it's our books, our conferences, our community sessions, well, we think you're going to trust the way we've brought those all together so that you can spend less time searching and browsing and more time learning and benefiting. I hope you'll try out the Rosenverse, and I hope you'll consider upgrading to a gold paid membership, because it brings you a lot more. Not only do you have access to hundreds and hundreds of recorded conference presentations, but you also get access to the Rosenbot, which is a ChatGPT 4 level chatbot that we've been training on all of our content, including our growing collection of nearly 60 books and counting. It's all there, it's all great content, and the Rosenbot is a cutting-edge way to get at it. You can try the gold membership out with a trial for 2 weeks. Give it a try. Hope you like it. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review, talking with Harry Max and Jorge Arango about, this is a podcast about a podcast today, which is kind of wild. And we got a couple information architecture people here. I know Harry, that's more a past role, but as you guys said, a lot of what you're going to be talking about is, in effect, IA and other aspects of UX, maybe without even using that terminology, which is great, because you're trying to frame it for decision makers, which is really something we need more of, clearly. But I'm really interested in the format. I mean, maybe this is a really geeky IA way to look at it, but are you thinking about it in terms of the IA of your podcast? Can we talk about it that way?
Let me just jump in real quick, Jorge. I'm going to let you pick it up. But what I would say, just back to the previous point of making the terms relevant to the people we're talking to, why talk about it as the information architecture of the podcast? Because if we were talking to educators, we would use a word like pedagogy, right? What is the teaching format? And if we're talking to leaders, we might talk about the structure, right? So it's about the language and how we deploy that language to help people make meaningful connections so they can think differently and do things differently.
So if you're listening, they're going to now talk about the open bracket format, pipe, information architecture, pipe, pedagogy, pipe, ... close bracket of their podcast. Okay, guys, I think we're ready now. Take it away.
All right, go Jorge.
When Harry was talking about the dinner we had in San Francisco, in Oakland, he said that he mentioned a potential format and my eyes lit up. And when I reached out to Harry, I did not have a format in mind. The Informed Life had a very particular format. Like when I reached out to guests, I said, look, this show has a structure. It has 3 acts, and these are the acts, right? And I had architected the experience. I didn't know what that would be for this thing. And I know that for other shows where there are two co-hosts, they usually agree beforehand on a topic, and there are different ways of doing that. And I thought like, well, maybe there's something like that where we have an agenda before recording an episode. But my concern there was that those conversations can feel a little canned.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would not want to have to do the research because that kind of kills a little bit of the improvisation and exploration that happens in a real conversation. And then Harry proposed this idea that is the point at which my eyes lit up, which was, and maybe this isn't what you proposed, but this is the way I heard it, Harry, was why don't we read passages from books to each other without letting the other person know what it is that we're reading from and then have them react?
Yeah.
And that was really exciting to me because I know that Harry reads and has read widely. And I know Harry's writing style, and I've talked enough with Harry to have a sense for how his mind works. And I thought, wow, this is really, really exciting because he's going to be throwing these curveballs at me that are going to force me to think on my feet, basically, and maybe talk a little bit outside of my comfort zone. And that is, it feels a little bit like every conversation that we record is a bit of a high wire act, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's exciting to me because it's kind of like the opposite of canned.
Well, I love this idea. It almost feels like it could be the basis of a course. It's like because it's like training. Like you're subjecting each other to language that may not only introduce a new idea, and we need to be able to react to those, but I imagine half the battle is going to be decoding the language itself. Translation, kind of like what we were just talking about a moment ago, Harry. You may be reading something from education that frames things pedagogically, and we're not all, everyone comes from a domain, everyone has a jargon or a vocabulary they're comfortable with. And in a way, you're going to be training each other to decode on the fly, not just the
Yeah, it's
concept,
very
but the
alive.
language. That's a cool idea.
But Lou, I'm hearing you say that, and it's sounding to me a little academic. I have to say it is not academic. So, for example, the very first conversation that we recorded, it was like, I don't know, did we draw lots, Harry? Like whatever we did, it was like my turn to like show Harry or tell Harry about a text, right? And I
Yeah.
picked a passage from Andy Grove's book, High Output Management, which is, I think it's a classic book on management. It's one that was influential to me. And I wanted to get Harry's thoughts on what I thought was a particularly relevant and perhaps provocative passage of that book, but not in the abstract, in practice, right? With the lens of what can someone listening to this who is in a position of leadership, what can they do to operate skillfully in a world where what Andy Grove is saying here is true?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think part of why the show is so alive is because I'm very much an applied guy. To me, it's not about, I dropped out of college, right? I dropped into the computer industry, into Silicon Valley. I'm very much about what works, about the utility of it, about making value, creating value, and then figuring out how to capture that value. And and so this notion of a higher wire act, I thought it was a great idea until Jorge read the passage, and then I had to wake up and respond to it in an intelligent way. It was a lot of fun.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess it is high wire. I got to imagine you're going to be kind of all tingly and excited as you do each one of these conversations. And that's probably not going to wear off because there's always going to be a bit of the unknown you confront given this format. How long would a passage typically be? I'm just trying to visualize it or maybe audioize it. It's more appropriate here for a podcast, but you're going to be reading, like one of you is just going to say, all right, here you go, listen to this, and then just read a passage of couple paragraphs typically?
Yeah, it's a few
Yeah.
paragraphs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm just going to listen because I'm just really interested in that high wire nature, just the reaction. And I you might be guys. I'm just going to tell you right now. You might fumble a bit, and you might be tempted to edit that out. I hope you don't, because even the fumbling is going to be useful.
Well,
It'll make it
there's
authentic.
yeah, but the flip side of this, it is a high wire act, but it's a high wire act with a net, right? Because to your point, there is editing, and we're just getting started with this, so we'll see how it develops. But if there is a lot of fumbling, we also want to give value to listeners, right? So we want this to come off as something that people can listen in, and where there's a good ratio of useful ideas per minute, right? So we want to be careful with how much wandering around the weeds there is, right? And by the way, you said that Harry, you said you described yourself as like, I don't remember what you said, something like an applications person, right? Or
An applied guy. Yeah.
an applied guy, right? And in some ways, I'm kind of the opposite. So I can go into the weeds a lot, and that's why I said like thoughtfulness to a fault at the beginning. So I'm hoping that we'll keep each other in check, right? Because like this might work in this might work in practice, but does it work in theory? That kind of thing, right?
Wow. I can't wait. So I'm really curious. Are you going to call it like management lit slam or something? It almost sounds like a poetry slam.
So what's the name, Harry?
So we've decided to call it Traction Heroes. And the idea behind that is, this is this thinking and tools to help you get traction. And you know, we're all heroes in our own mind. So I'm not so sure that we ourselves are the heroes. We want to make the listener the hero, but the idea is to share these passages and these ideas from great thinkers and then riff on them in a very improv style with a density of sort of usefulness to verbiage being high, uh, and really help people, get traction and increase the momentum they're getting and have it help them make progress in the world.
Traction Heroes. I love it. And I can't wait to listen to the first one, which you said is going to drop in January of 2025 at some point.
Yeah,
What do you have a
by the
date?
time this comes out, it will be live. Yeah.
Fantastic. So where will we go to listen to Traction Heroes
Well,
besides
there's a website.
Spotify and Apple? What's the website?
The website is tractionheroes.com. So, and heroes is spelled like David Bowie spells it. So Heroes, right?
Is there another way?
I don't know. Maybe people think it's like the hero sandwich. Isn't
Oh,
that?
that would be kind of cool too. You might want to grab that one and redirect. Guys, it's been a pleasure, as always, talking with you and seeing how your minds work and seeing how they work together. So thanks for that. In fine Rosenfeld review form, we have a ritual here before we wrap up. You guys, I assume, you remember to bring those gifts for our listeners?
Yeah,
All right. Harry, how about you first?
sure. Well, on the heels of, the Informed Life closing down and Traction Heroes fired up, uh, I wanted to suggest a book that I found particularly helpful and illuminating and inspiring, book by the author, Dr. Henry Cloud, called Necessary Endings. And one of the maybe a takeaway is that at some point in the book, he looks at endings as gardening and a way of sort of tending to the things that are growing in your world and figuring out where to, trim things that may need to be smaller and how to, cut things that need to move on and how to create the space for new things in your life.
Awesome. I should check that out. I've always identified with Chauncey Gardner. Hope you get the reference.
Oh, yeah,
Um, all right. How about
absolutely.
you, Jorge?
The gift I bring is a pointer to a Substack called The Honest Broker by Ted Gioia. Ted Gioia is a jazz critic and somebody who I think is kind of a humanity person at large. And in this podcast, he has a series of posts on that is basically a curriculum for immersing yourself in the humanities in 52 weeks. And I'm very excited about this because there's never been a better time for people who are self-learners. On the one hand, many classic books, many of the things certainly that Gioia points to in his curriculum are available freely online. But also, there's these wonderful YouTube courses and all sorts of things, right? And then we have AI, which for has some downsides, but it can also be a wonderful tutor. So I'm in the process of kind of relearning how to learn given this new world that we're in. So I'm following the Gioia's 52-week humanities course, and I'm sharing it in my blog. But I just think everyone should go over. If you have any inclination to immerse yourself in the classics, this feels like a really good way to do it.
Mark Zuckerberg, if you're listening, and I know you are, you might take note of that. Guys, thank you so much. Thanks for the gifts. Thanks for being with us today. Harry, Max, Jorge Arango, doing something new in this new year, 2025. Great to have you on the show today.
Really
appreciate
It's always a treat. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. I'd love it if you tell a friend to have a listen, and check out our website for over 100 podcasts with other interesting people. You'll find them all at rosenfeldreview.com.